Today we are going to have a presentation on the civil war which happened in Libya. In this presentation, we will base on 4 extents to discuss. The first one is the reason that the people in Libya would fight against with the government. Second, we will explain the government's response to the protester. The third one is the reasons why the social media has not been used by the protester extensively. The last point we will discuss is the reasons that the human rights of the protester have been violated. First of all, let me have a short summary about Libya. Since 1969, Gaddafi organized a revolution to overturn the old Libya regime and reform a new government. After Libya has been governed by the new government, the government used the hardline approach to treat their citizens. So the citizens started to help some of the demonstrations in order to rebel against the government. Then, we will base on the civil war which happened in 2011 to discuss those 4 extents. The first extent is the reason that the people in Libya would revolt against the government. The first reason that the people in Libya would fight against the government is they want to get back their freedom. In the past, people who discussed about the political issue of Libya will be seen as illegal. During 1980s to 1990s, the curriculum on studying foreign language were subtracted from the school. This measure would cause the citizens have lack of understanding of foreign language, such as English and French. They even don't know how to communicate with other foreigners. Being illiteracy, the citizens were very angry with the government and they were extremely willing to get what they should have, such as the right to speak and express their personal feeling and the right to get knowledge. The citizens deserve to have this human right and the freedom. The second reason that the people would rebel against the government is to overturn the corrupt government. During the dominance of Gaddafi gave most of the authorities to those people who were his relatives. Since the unfair enthronement and the corrupt society, the inhabitants started to rebel against the government. Moreover, the whole country's income in Libya was mainly come from the oil production. This state's revenue was almost half of the total income of Libya. And the total income of Libya is even higher than other foreign countries, such as Egypt. Thus, the living standard of the population of Libya is supposed to be higher than other countries. They should have a good education system for their citizens and more social subsidies to the residents like housing subsidies. However, the truth is that the government in Libya didn't have any subsidies for their inhabitants. But where did the government use the money? In the 1970s, the government spent a huge amount of money on the martial area such as buying weapons. The government also assists the anti-socialists in the foreign country. Being the inhabitants of the country, people should be treated well. The government has the responsibility to look after their citizens rather than spending most of the money on martial area. As a result, the demonstrators want to overturn the corrupt government through the demonstration. The last reason that the citizens would fight against the government is they want to get the attention to the entire world. Since the government blocked all the communication and media facilities to report the political issues, and even did not allow the citizens to talk about the political issue to the foreigner. So that this demonstration reflects that the demonstrators' aim is to get the attention to the entire world in order to have the peer pressure to change the political system in Libya.
Okay, let me talk about the government response to the protester. The first response that the government has been done to the protester is block all the communication and media facilities. The government has blocked the communication and media, such as the BBC News, The Guardian and also the journalists from Brazil. In a case, a BBC journalist was injured by Gaddafi soldiers. The soldiers shot next to the journalist's ears and laughed at him. This case really showed that the government fed the citizens in the general public in order to force them to obey the government rules. Also, some of the journalists have been detained by the government. Besides, Gaddafi murdered some international journalists. They attempt to block all the information in Libya, but the New York Times reported the attempt of government to people. Gaddafi did not permit citizens to discuss anything about the demonstration to foreigners and censor all the media as they could. Every people who talk about the protest will be seen as illegal and would be imprisoned for maximum 10 years or be killed secretly. The aims of blocking the communication facilities is Gaddafi did not want Libya to have the poor reputation. Secondly, another government's response is they hire the mercenary from foreign country in order to kill the protester by using brutal ways. For example, they would send the sniper to kill the protester, using heavy artillery to fire the demonstrator, dispatching helicopters and warplanes to fire from the sky onto the demonstrator on the ground, shooting all the routers brutally, and even detaching warships against the demonstrator. Also, Gaddafi recruited killers to assassinate the people who criticized them from 2004 till now. The government paid $1 million to enlist killers from other countries to murder the journalists in Libya who were willing to immigrate to England. Moreover, the government would subdue the demonstrator at any cost. They execute the demonstrator and the people who fight against the government in public without any hiding. They will show the process of execute the demonstrator via the broadcast station. This action aimed to that the people did not rebel against the government anymore. The government attempted to slaughter all prisoners within 3 hours in the jail. Thirdly, the government would not give any treatment to the protesters who are injured in the protest. During the demonstration, there were some demonstrators being injured. However, they were permitted to be hospitalized. But some people who need blood would not be given any blood as well, because the government want to kill one to warn the hundred, so as to deter anyone from committing the same. As I mentioned before, some journalists were murdered by the Gaddafi soldiers. There was a typical example. That is in 16 March 2011. 4 New York Times journalists were missing in Libya. It can show that the Gaddafi government did not allow the journalists to report any contents about Libya, and the government want to block all the communication and media in Libya. There are other cases we can show that the government in Libya was prohibit the journalists to report their issue. In this picture, we can find out that some photographers were hushed by the tape. It can be seen as the Gaddafi government has not allowed the journalists to report any issue or information which relate to the civil war to the foreign countries. As a result, the Libyan government's reputation would not be affected by the negative information which reported by the reporters.
At last, I'm going to talk about how the social media has been used by the protesters to organize and communicate. In Libya, the protesters could not use the social media to organize activity and communicate with others. They could not spread any information about the civil war through the media to foreign countries, since the government blocked all the communication and media in Libya. They would censor all the areas such as internet, television, and radio. So the protesters would not show any contents of the protests through the social media. The media in Libya is under the control of the government of Gaddafi, so the government could control the broadcast easily. Gaddafi blocked all the negative information, so this kind of information cannot be spread through the protester to the social media. Besides, as the citizens were threatened by the government, they were very afraid to spread the information about the protest because they were afraid to be murdered by the government. Also, I will talk about how the human rights of protesters been violated. The human rights of demonstrators has been infringed by the government in Libya. Since the government censored all the media, banned all the demonstrations, the citizens were not permitted to communicate to the foreigners, especially when they are going to talk about the issue about the demonstration which happened in Libya. Also, the government spent $300 to engage mercenaries from foreign countries to kill the protesters secretly. If the protesters spread the issue to other people such as journalists. When the protester induced demonstration against the government dispatched the police to subdue the demonstrators in beaten way. From those violent treatments, we can conclude that the human rights in Libya has been violated, since they may be murdered or be treated with brutality. To conclude our presentation, the aim of the people in Libya who fight against the government is that they want to have freedom and without the government control. Also, the citizens want to overturn the corrupt government. Another aim of the citizens in Libya who rebel against the government is that they want to get attention to the entire world. They want to make use of the ambient pressure to give pressure to Libya's government. So, it may lead the government to change their political system. Another point that we have been pointed out in this presentation is the government's response to the protesters. The government blocked all the communication and media facilities in order to disallow the protesters to communicate with the external world. Besides, the government hired the mercenaries so as to kill the protesters. The government also would not give any treatment to the protesters. They would give stress to the medical workers, so the workers would not rescue the protesters. The third point that we have been measured is how the social media has been used by the protesters to organize a demonstration and communicate with each other. The protesters could not use the media to spread the information to foreign countries. The last point we have been measured is the human rights have been violated in Libya. The citizens did not have any rights to communicate with the foreigners. Otherwise, they would be killed secretly. As a result, we can conclude that Libya was experiencing the internal conflict since long time ago till now.